Hi folks, it's Coach Kelvin here from the We Run Virtual Run Club and We Run Coach for Leeds and surrounding areas as well as online coaching. In this little video, I'd like to talk about speed, and it's a little bit of a progression from last week's video on strides, but I just wanted to add a little bit more kind of context of why speed is so important. So speed is important because a lot of runners I speak to want to get faster at various distances, and the runners that I coach, it's usually from 5k up to ultra marathons. And quite often people get kind of like hung up on this idea that once they've done a 10k they do a half marathon, and once they do a half marathon they do a marathon, and once they've done a marathon they do an ultra. And you know, we can kind of imagine that picture, that kind of challenge of going further. But quite often when I speak to these runners, they actually want to go further, but they also want to be relatively faster at those longer distances as well. And quite often, as people increase the distance of the events that they're doing, maybe sometimes a little bit too quickly, speed can be just sort of laid to one side a little bit, where it's all about building up aerobic capacity and aerobic endurance to get somebody round a marathon, which is fair enough. But sometimes it's worth injecting a speed block into your training to make sure that your running economy is as efficient as possible when we're doing the longer events. And running economy is really important for longer events, because the longer we're out, the more of a difference it makes. And when I talk about running economy, let's use the analogy of a car. If we had a car that had a really powerful engine, but the bearings in the wheels were really, really loose, and the handbrake was always kind of slightly on, even though the engine was really strong and efficient, and that car could kind of utilize fuel really efficiently as well, it still wouldn't go very fast because of its mechanical inefficiencies. And that's why we've got to be careful as runners. It's really interesting. A number of years ago, a big study was done on UTMB runners, which is a 100-mile mountain race with 10,000 meters of ascent and descent. And one of the things that correlated really well was the runners' time that they could run a mile against their finishing position in a 100-mile race. So the people that won the 100-mile race also had a really fast 1 mile time, and that means their running economy is just really, really good. And quite often, you know, things like VO2 max work is missed out of training, and we could put a VO2 max phase in before a base building phase, so that when we're building up the base and doing the sort of main bulk of volume within a training block, we're as efficient as possible whilst we're doing that. And the other thing that's interesting that a lot of people don't know as well about VO2 max, it actually maxes out after about 6 to 8 weeks of training. So we can't drive any more VO2 max by doing like more and more. So a short phase of maybe like maybe 4 weeks of like strides and easy hundreds, maybe even some 200-meter reps, then maybe a sort of 4 to 6 week VO2 phase before a base building phase. So that runner could actually, just for the fun of it, train for a 5k over maybe a sort of 10 to 12 week period before adding volume to train for like maybe like a 100k race. So which seems crazy, doesn't it, that we're training these kind of like either strides, which is kind of 30 meters all out, hundreds, 200s, VO2 max work, which is lots of 3k, 5k race pace, in order to be able to do better at half marathons, and maybe even longer distance events. But what we're doing is we're increasing the body's neurological connections, so the brain to the legs, to make sure that the muscles that we've already got are firing like in like a really efficient way. So it's just something to think about, that if we're kind of constantly wanting to do longer events, it is worth every now and then just injecting some speed into your training before your sort of base building phase starts, to make sure that when we roll into the base building phase, we're running as economically as possible. So I hope that makes some sort of sense. And if you have any questions or thoughts, please just pop them in the comments below. And for now, happy running!